Hey guys, my name is Anthony and in today's video we're going to be talking about some basic tips that I personally used when learning how to drive without assist in the F1 games, so that you guys can use them whether it's in F1 2019 or F1 2020 if you're watching this in a few months from now. So a lot of these tips are actually combined in a sort of way. Like a lot of them you're only really going to see the main benefits of them if you actually combine them together. So you're going to want to listen to all of them, and you're going to want to start practicing all of them as well, whether you practice them one by one and then start combining them, or you just start trying to combine them from the get-go. So the first tip is to short shift and use lower ERS modes coming out of corners. The main reason for that is, if you're interested in racing, obviously you'll be interested in racing if you're playing F1, but if you're into the whole real life racing, you will know that there's a saying where it's slow in and fast out, and the best way to basically be fast out of a corner is to get the maximum grip possible. And to do that in F1 2019 specifically, you need to short shift, because if you don't short shift, then there's a lot of power going into the rear tires, more power than the rear tire grip allows for, which is why most people spin out when coming out of slow corners. So you want to short shift to minimize the wheel spin, and another way to minimize the wheel spin is to use lower ERS modes as well, so that not as much power is going towards the rear tires essentially. So you want to short shift, which is basically when you're shifting up the gear before the optimal time, which is usually when the purple lights show up on the sort of like gear on the gear bar there. You wanna short shift. You wanna shift before that, and then that's called short shifting. And you also wanna roughly use high ERS if you're coming out of corner, or what I tend to use is no ERS, and then I shoot it up. Once I've found enough grip in the car, I'll shoot it up to hot lap and then put it back down to high. So you want to really play around with it and see what works for you and what doesn't. Moving on to the next tip, which again, as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of these tips are combining together. This one is you want to apply a small amount of throttle coming out of a corner and then steadily increase it. Now when you're going into medium or even high speed corners, there's a lot of downforce in the car that's really pushing the car down to the ground. So that's giving it a lot of grip. That's why you're able to just press onto the throttle essentially straight away. But in slower speed corners, you don't have that downforce. So when you press onto the throttle, like if you're using traction control or if you're going through a high speed corner, you end up spinning out because you don't have the grip on the car that you do when you're going through a high speed corner. So you want to slowly apply maybe 30 to 50% or even 30 to 40% on the throttle, and then you want to combine that with short shifting. And then when you found enough grip, when you feel as if there's enough grip in the car, then you can start to sort of not necessarily slam, but just increase it slightly. Just increase the amount of throttle you're putting on steadily until you get to 100%. So you want to combine those first two, and then that really gives you the optimum sort of speed that you're looking for coming out of a slow speed corner. Because when it comes to the F1 tracks, a lot of these slow speed corners are followed by a long straight, and if your exit is not the best, if you're getting a 5 out of 10 exit, you're going to be slower all the way down the straight, and that's not going to be good, especially if you're racing against people who are the same level as you or even better than you, because they're just going to pass you on the straights. So my next tip is you want to learn each track's braking points and use hot laps as references. Now this is probably the most daunting task when it comes to each of these tips, because especially in the F1 2020 game that's about to come out, there's going to be 22 tracks, which means you're going to have to learn the braking points for every single corner on every single track, which I can understand is completely daunting. But one little tip that I personally do is, if you're league racing specifically, or you can even use this if you're in career mode as well, pick the track that you're about to do in career mode or you're about to do in your league race. So for example, at the time of recording this, I've got a league race coming up on Monaco on Sunday, and that's the track that I'm really trying to push and learn different braking points and different lines through. Obviously Monaco's a really tight track, so there's only so many different lines you can take, but basically you want to use the track that you're about to race on and then learn that track, and then you want to learn all the braking points for that track, you want to learn all the lines for that track, and just focus on that track. Don't try and learn, say, Australia if you're going to be racing at Abu Dhabi. It doesn't really make sense. There's no reason for you to learn Australia at this time. So that's the best real tip I can give you in terms of learning each track. You want to prioritize the track, and the best way to do that is to prioritize the track that you're about to race on. So moving on to the fourth tip now is you want to practice trail braking so that you're not locking up your tires. The biggest issue with taking ABS off is obviously locking up your tires, and if you lock up your tires, even in the dry, if you lock up your tires, you're going to end up overshooting the corner, or even if you do make the corner, 8 times out of 10 you're probably going to miss the apex, which is going to obviously scrub off quite a lot of lap time. And in the wet, if you're locking up, then you're just going to overshoot the corner. There's no helping you in after that pretty much. So you want to practice trail braking or pump braking. I'm not really going to talk about pump braking in this one because me personally, I don't use it. I use trail braking. So when it comes to trail braking, what you do is you apply 100% of the brake at first, and as your car is slowing down and you're starting to get ready to turn the car into the corner, you want to slowly lift up from the brake until you're at the desired speed, and then obviously you can try and get the best exit that you can. I've got obviously some gameplay running in the background, so over the course of this entire video you would have already seen me trail braking throughout this video. So pay attention to my brake inputs and my throttle inputs throughout the rest of this video, and you'll see exactly what I mean when I'm talking about applying small amount of throttle coming out slow corners and trail braking going into corners as well. So my next tip is to understand which gear you need to be in, because that can shave off a lot of lap time. Now when it comes to F1 2019 in particular, when you're using automatic gears, you're not necessarily going into a corner in the most optimum gear. I've noticed when I used to play on automatic gears, like for example at turn 1 in Australia, if I brake too much, I'm actually going into the corner in 3rd gear, when you can actually go into that corner in either 4th gear or 5th gear. So you really want to learn this. Again, combines with the sort of like looking at hot laps as references, so that you can actually see what gear people are going into the corner, and in the top times in the world. Because that's honestly what I did. I'd watch hot laps from like Veloce James or OMGH Joe or even TRL Limitless and see what gear are they going into a specific corner. So for example, turn 3 or turn 2, whichever you prefer, at Austria, a lot of people might go into that corner in 2nd gear, but you might not get enough turning in the car to really get the best exit. So you really want to be trying to get the car turned in so you can get the best exit going down that DRS straight. So basically you want to go into 1st gear so you can actually get that extra rotation that everyone's talking about when it comes to F1 2019, so you can get that best exit. And my last tip is actually for wet condition driving. And basically you want to take all the tips I've mentioned before when it comes to wet driving, but then when it comes to for example the braking part of those tips, you want to brake a lot earlier than you would in the dry. So for example, turn 1 at Monza, I usually brake just after the 150 meter board, but in the wet conditions you want to brake before the 150 meter board. So it's general rule of thumb that when driving in wet weather conditions, you want to brake between 20 to 40 meters before you would in the dry, I'm pretty sure. And you want to shift down the gears a little bit slower as well. And this, I can't stress this enough, don't put as much brake pressure when going into a corner when it comes to wet weather driving, because you're much more likely to lock the car up in wet weather conditions. So you want to sort of put maybe 80% instead of 100% at first, and then slowly lift off as you're getting ready to turn the car into the corner. So that's pretty much all the basic tips that I've got written down on my phone here when it comes to taking the assist off when it comes to F1. If you want any more assist, or if you want any more tips on driving without assists, or if you have any more tips of your own with when it comes to driving without assist, then hit the like button, subscribe, and even comment them down below. Also follow me on Twitter and Twitch as well. I'll leave those links in the description as well. So I'll see you guys in the next video.